This is Why Small Business Matters from Northumbria University, supporting small businesses with the Help to Grow management programme.
Hello and welcome to today's Why Small Business Matters. And today's a bit of an interesting episode because we are celebrating our third birthday. We're having a bit of a retrospective, a little bit of a look back, but also thinking about that last COVID lockdown 3 years ago in July 2021. We think we have pulled together 10 lessons learned from listening back to some of those guests that we've heard from. I'm joined today by Matt and Ian, our producer, and really this is a way for us to try and think about those guests that we've had on and really try and share some of those lessons with you, the listener. So Matt, I'm going to ask you to kick off. You hosted the first episode. What was that like? Remind us who they were and really what we think we gained from it. It was a different time, wasn't it?
It was. I remember August 2021 writing to Oli Barrett, the most connected person in the UK in terms of the business community, and Caroline Theobold around coming onto this podcast and really trying to envisage what it was going to do and what it was going to be like. But I think one of the things that we knew for certain we wanted to do was the topic, and that was networking. We wanted to explore how important people were in business. And having Oli and Caroline on there were two fantastic people who knew that area very well, and I knew would be able to explore and provide really practical insights into the world of networking. It was a different world. It was coming out of COVID. I don't think we'd had any physical networking opportunities. There was still a little bit of nervousness about who should run the first event. And I think as soon as one person had that first physical event, probably the rest followed. But the beauty of having Caroline and Oli on is they reminded us and the listeners about how really important networking is and how important people are to doing really successful business. And I remember Oli particularly giving us some really practical insights in how to get out of our comfort zone and to broaden our network.
The day-to-day technique I use the most is try to be helpful. So when I spot an interesting article or an interesting piece, 4 times out of 5, I try and ping it on to at least one other person. Yep. And I think that can really form the secret to a great follow-up as well, which is to say, Matt, lovely to meet and cross paths. Here's that restaurant I mentioned. Here's that book I mentioned. And that is 10 times better than the arbitrary LinkedIn request or the nice to meet you and let's keep in touch, goodbye. Add a little bit of extra intel and it shows you remembered them, you care about them, and you'll keep looking out for them.
Social interaction is very different when it's online. You can go all the way around the world to learn about new things. That is very different from going to a place and building a relationship face to face. And I think that if you have the ability to do both, that's where the magic can happen. But always it's creating the new things, but also always, as Oli said before, it's keeping in touch with the people who've already helped. It's not always going just out there. It's nurturing those relationships and friendships and connections that you've got.
And it wasn't just Oli and Caroline, was it, talking about networking? We had John McCabe on from the North East Chamber of Commerce. I think he was really also trying to encourage listeners to invest in their networks.
Absolutely. I think when we reflect over the last 3 years, I think the most common, and I'm sure Ian would agree for producing this podcast, the most common theme to come up, regardless of that episode's subject matter, has been networks, and people underpin a lot of that activity. But I remember John sitting down and being interviewed by our colleague Hannah Hessel-Greaves and talking about the importance of networks. And this is somebody who is head and chief executive of the North East Chamber of Commerce, integrating and meeting lots of businesses, small and big, day in, day out. But regardless of their size, regardless of their history or stature, people really make them tick. And John talked about the importance of people and the importance of keeping those networks warm.
Increases your likelihood of actually being able to eventually have that conversation with somebody who's been through exactly the same issue that you're dealing with and come out of it the other side. So I would really, whether it's through the chamber, and obviously we'd love people to join the chamber, whether it's tapping into the support that your business school and our other business schools are offering, whether it's tapping into an alumni network, or perhaps a more of a sort of sectoral-based network. I just think that is so important because, as I said, there are very few, I think, unique and first-time challenges and pressures out there. The vast majority of them, if not all of them, will have been faced at some point before. And sometimes you can find the answer in the place you're least expecting to find it too. So surround yourself with a good network, surround yourself with good people. And I think importantly as well, and again, this is a challenge because time is so precious for small business leaders, but take the time to invest your personal capital in your network. In other words, be active in that network when you don't necessarily need it. Because if you do that, it is much more likely to be there at the very moment you do need it. So that means, again, playing that full part in your network and in your community, because that, I think, is where you'll find the support will be more readily available to you when you do need it.
So not just those traditional networking events, but one of our guests, Jeni Smith from NetKnow, she emphasised really the need for business leaders to go out and broaden their horizons really for a return on investment, not just stick with the same people that you know.
Jeni's was one of those podcasts when she sat down with Paul Beale, who probably had to mention some of the things that we always didn't really want to think about. She highlighted the practical steps that we should take now we were getting out and networking again. And I remember she highlighted the fear factor of networking. And it was well into the 90%. It was something that we all feel a little bit of uncertainty around. And going into that room, not knowing anybody, the kind of reaching for your phone, looking at the floor habit of trying to eat away at some of the time and not be looking like you're standing on your own was something that she was bold enough to bring out. And her and Paul explored how you can mingle around a room and how we can get out of our shell and really introduce ourselves and learn about other businesses. And she did that so well.
Being strategic with networking. The free events aren't always the best events. So often startups, we're all guilty of it. We've got a lot of expenses. There's not, as a startup business, you've got a lot of things to be spending money on. Networking is often very bottom of the pile of, of things to be spending cash on. So a lot of startups go to the free events. The thing about the free events is that they're great because it's a good starting place. However, you're probably going to connect with other people who are also, there because they're free events.
Sure.
So if that's not your target market, if you're thinking about what your price point is, if your price point is 10 grand plus, for example, a startup's probably not going to be the person you want to sell to. So going to the free events can be great to connect with other startups, yes, which is really important to have that peer-to-peer support. However, if you want to network for return on investment in regards to getting sales, then the free events might not be the best.
You talk about networking as a process. But actually part of that process, or part of that DNA of that process, I should say, is really good communication. And I remember when Scott Gould came onto the podcast, Scott was, or is a sole trader, somebody who specializes in engagement training and communication training. And actually, I think it's really easy to overlook communication because we communicate daily. But actually having really clear communication inside the office with people we know or with people we're meeting for the first time, as you both say around networking, is so important. And actually good communication skills and having thoughtful communication can really lubricate the networking process. It can make you have those really good conversations and hopefully lead to lots of meetings and cups of coffee with people in your or outside of your network who can help your business.
We like to think engagement is all about these really masterful, skillful, amazing things. And yes, that's true. But all of those skillful things have three basic elements that most people miss. And they're very unlikely, but actually they're really powerful. The first, clear communication. I mean, achingly clear. I'm talking Ron Seal quick drying varnish. It does exactly what it says on the tin. That level of clarity, right? Don't call your product some whimsical, mystical name. Give it the Ron Seal name, right? Give your business the Ron Seal name. Give your job descriptions the Ron Seal treatment, right? Real clear. The second is easy. It's easy to act. It's easy to buy. Easy's got the most important thing. In the age of Amazon, Prime and gross convenience, easy. People are able to do their job. They're able to buy from you. That's the most critical thing. You know, the idea there is remove the blockages, just make it easy. And then the final word is beneficial. Are there beneficial outcomes to working for you or to buying from you? And if there are, state them, emphasize them, show people that you meet their outcomes. And you have a good shot at being able to work with them again.
He was a very engaging guest, wasn't he? And I think what he was saying was be clear to everyone. Be clear to those people that you want to recruit to work for you. Be clear to your customers. The benefits are obvious.
He is just so like absolutely no nonsense, clear. You know what the message is. There's no sort of doubt about it. And he's a former preacher, isn't he, I think? And he's sort of got this sort of way of delivering. It's like delivering a sermon on business the way he goes, and it was fantastic. And I think if I was going to say for anybody to listen, to any one particular episode, that would be my one I would recommend personally, because I think it was just, and it was stuff that you can use now as well. And I think that's what we want to get out of the podcast, is give people some info, some tips or tricks or whatever that you can actually implement into your business straight away today, that's going to make a difference. And I think none more so than Scott Gould, because it was all usable stuff straight away out of the box. Yeah, Ron Seal on the tin.
Very clear. I suppose number 3, Matt, is up your street, because this is knowledge exchange and working with academics. Tell us about the interview you did with Joe Marshall and Stuart Wilkinson.
We've so far talked an awful lot about the importance of communication and networking business to business. And I think that's the traditional and fairly uniform way of looking at it. One thing this podcast has done is expose an area of business which is actually very established, but sometimes goes under the radar. And that's with business, large and small, partnering and working successfully with universities. I think if you ask many small firms, would you go to university to overcome some of your challenges, then they probably wouldn't have them in their top 5 or maybe even their top 10 of their list. But actually, when we scratch into the surface, we see that universities are a significant partner and catalyst to small firms, to overcoming challenges and helping them innovate. And we sat down with Stuart Wilkinson, who at the time was head of something called Knowledge Exchange at the University of Oxford, and Joe Marshall, who was the chief executive of the National Centre for University and Business, to get insights into how business and universities can collaborate.
My top tip is to remember it's very, very difficult, but stick by your guns when you start to have an imaginative idea, and because if you don't, you won't be able to deliver on the difficult. That does not mean dogmatic. Always adapt your position and your route forward as you get new information. But if you aren't willing to take that challenge and champion things, you won't do the biggest, most exciting things. So have the courage to do that.
Unfortunately, effectively, my top tip would be a variation of the same. It's embrace the difficulty and the challenge and the complexity, because, as I say, I believe that technology transfer and making innovative technologies sort of come to life is supposed to be difficult, but actually it is one of the most exciting things that I think you can do as a job.
I think there's a myth that many people think that universities are slow. In a national crisis, there was an awful lot of know-how and research within that institution, and bringing that big multinational partner together overcame a national challenge. And I don't really know how it could have been done otherwise without bringing that academic expertise and research together with the finance and sort of power and machinery of a big multinational. But it happened. And that's just a great example of knowledge exchange activity that Stuart and Joe were highlighting in that episode.
You're listening to Why Small Business Matters. Find out how Northumbria University can help your business thrive through the Help to Grow management programme.
delivered by leading small business and enterprise experts from Northumbria University, with the support of leading figures from industry and experienced entrepreneurs. The programme supports senior managers of small and medium-sized businesses to boost their business's performance, resilience and long-term growth. The 12-week programme is 90% funded by the government, and the fee payable by participants is £750 and has been designed to allow participants to complete it alongside full-time work. The in-depth, high-quality curriculum supports you to build your capabilities in leadership, innovation, digital adoption, employee engagement, marketing, responsible business and financial management. By the end of the programme, you'll develop a business growth plan to help you lead your business to realise its potential. To find out more about the programme, the modules, eligibility and fees and delivery dates, go to northumbria.ac.uk/help-to-grow.
One of the things I've really enjoyed working with you both over the last 3 years in terms of the podcast is how we've been quite bold and we've taken it on the road and we've done live versions of the podcast and we've brought people together to celebrate the work of really effective university and business collaboration. One of them, of course, is the Arrow Innovation Programme. Sarah, tell us a little bit about that programme.
Yeah, it was a really good opportunity to sit down and chat to the other universities involved in Arrow. So we had Newcastle, Durham, Sunderland and Northumbria sitting on the stage together, two new businesses that had gone through the Arrow Innovation Project, really helping them to innovate alongside academics within a couple of institutions, and really to understand that there is a lot of collaboration between universities, not just competition and competition for students, etc., but very much collaborating on working with business in the region. And it was a really good opportunity to find out what people were doing, the different academics involved, the different support staff, and how they were really helping to promote this innovative programme, Arrow Innovation.
So Newcastle did the hard work early doors. They had a pilot project, an initial version of Arrow they ran in a previous programme of funding. So we were all watching from the sidelines and helping them, supporting them and seeing how that project worked and embedded really well. So when the opportunity came to collaborate, and Newcastle were really open about getting us all in the room and talking it through, we had a really good understanding of what the project already was and what we hoped that we could bring to it. So we've definitely benefited from Newcastle setting this thing up originally, and now we're all able to come along and be part of that team. It's a lovely collaboration between all the universities in the region. And the reason for it predominantly is that we've all got different bits of expertise, different research excellence that we can bring to the project. And working together, it's more efficient, it's hopefully more effective for businesses to be able to access the support they need. And yeah, it's working really, really, really well. We all know each other very well, which I think is helping. And those relationships are really flowing through in terms of the management team coming together.
Yeah, so Armatrex was set up probably 8 years ago out of necessity, out of a need for an observation of a market gap for a splinting system, which, quite frankly, is time for change. And we're all about innovation and changing technology, and also how we do things. So I came across a expanding foam polymer, and we then reverse engineer that chemistry. The polymer that we were using at that time was for packing artifacts raised from the Titanic seabed. We took on global exhibition around the world, and we then reverse engineered that technology, that chemistry, and with the help of Lancaster University, we slowed the process down and basically made it so that it could be activated by hand and then form a gutter-shaped splint around an injured limb. The process then was to make that a commercial opportunity and to actually commercialise it properly. And the challenge was we had a couple of engineering issues to resolve, which was to do with how the seals broke and in what sequence. And we then met and came across Arrow Project back in 2018 and worked extensively with the team there in the chemistry labs, and some tremendous R&D was achieved. And here we are again on the second round of Arrow some many years later.
One of the things this podcast does is it has convening power, and actually bringing our expertise and our technical expertise in terms of Ian and our knowledge of small business and university sector allows us to put on these events. I think one of the areas we tried to do, of course, was the live podcast in the Baltic, which talked about the Help to Grow management program and some of the successes we've had with the program. Sarah, what are some of the memorable takeaways from the conversation that we heard at the Baltic around the Help to Grow management program?
Our first anniversary event was a live episode that we ran at the Baltic, where we had a number of business support people on the panel alongside some participants from the early cohorts of Help to Grow management that we run at Northumbria. And it was really great to hear from successful businesses how they felt empowered to make change within their organisation. And one of them, Kelly Maxwell from Kelly's Heroes, a private tuition business based in locally in Newcastle, now with various centres, has gone on to win lots of awards. So it's always great to meet up with people like that again.
I think I was on this like hamster wheel, you know, trying to just keep up with everything and keep going, and having that mentoring really opened my eyes to say, actually, you don't have to do 1,000,000 hours to be a successful business. It's about managing that time and creating that roadmap. And from that, it's opening doors within the business I didn't expect to. And, you know, I think a lot of the time we're all in our own business. We're all kind of doing what we think is right. But hearing it from the outside, going on a course and learning all of these really helps you realise that actually it doesn't just have to be one way. There's so many different ways that actually could be better than you had imagined.
Kelly Maxwell actually appeared a couple of times on the podcast. She's been a good friend to our Small Business Matters, because we did an episode about the business clinic as well at Northumbria University, and she was one of the people that spoke on that, on how the business clinic has helped her business move forward as well as the Help to Grow. So she's very much invested in firstly in this podcast, but also in the help that Northumbria University can supply to small businesses. It's not just small businesses and startups. We've also spoken to some fairly big names in the world of industry, and one of those was Raman Sehgal, who's actually, I think, a Northumbria alumni himself, but has gone on to big things in the pharmaceutical industry, and also he's authored some books as well. And Sarah, you read one of his recent books, and you had a chat with him.
I did. Really interesting. Since gone on to open an office in Canada, and I suppose the main takeaway from having a chat with Raman was telling entrepreneurs and business owners to really think about engineering goals and milestones within their business life and having no regrets. You know, take the plunge. Why can't it be you that sets up that new business? So he, very dynamic person to listen to, and obviously gone on to great things with RAM Marketing. But I suppose that's something that comes up time and time again, isn't it? When you're talking to entrepreneurs, they use words like risk and no regrets and be bold. Not all of us exist in that world, but it's always really interesting when you come across someone like that who is very engaging, and really enjoyed having a chat with him.
I projected, being on my last day at Earth and effectively at the gates of heaven, or whatever your belief system is, basically meeting a much better version of myself. Kind of like, hey, dude, like, you could have become me and you've ended up like that, and it, playing that out, being, oh my God, I do not want to get to the end of my life and realize that I have not given it my all and I've not become the best version of myself, and the repercussions of what that means, being the best dad you can be, being the best husband, being the best brother, son, etc., being the best in business and leaders. And I think for me, when I read it, I ended up going down a path of actually almost re-engineering where I wanted to get in life and what I wanted to do based on what would I regret. You go to the future and think about yourself in the future, and what will you regret? And that then effectively re-engineers some key goals and milestones, and that's how it worked.
There's obviously a phrase, isn't there? Shy Bairns getting out in the Northeast, and I think that when you look at some of the successful business operators, the entrepreneurs, that is a lot of what it comes down to, is having the, yes, you've got to have the will and power and confidence to back it up. But sometimes it can just be as simple as that conversation of going up to someone. And this also goes back to networking in a way as well, doesn't it? Of just being bold and being brave and stepping out of whatever your comfort zone is, just push yourself that little extra couple of percent, because you never know what it might bring.
I think technology is also something which has come up a number of times over the 3 years and over the various episodes that we've recorded. And I particularly like, Sarah, the episode that you did with Justin Turner, where he provided really practical steps into highlighting how technology doesn't need to be a threat, but how it can create efficiencies and streamline processes within small firms.
So Justin is an accountant by training, but he's also an entrepreneur, and he has written books. And he has very practical tips for people. What he'll say is, automate your workflows. It saves so much time. You use the apps that are available. You don't have to go out and spend a fortune, but make sure that they all work together. And there are lots of ways that you can use AI to improve processes. Of course, people then start thinking, well, is that going to take my job away? But actually, it tends to streamline things rather than remove the person from it. And so just keeping that human communication, being human-centric. So there is a role for people within your organization. Digital transformation doesn't take people away from the business, or that's the hope, I suppose. But there's always that fear that jobs are going to disappear with the use of technology, I suppose. But he is a great one for balancing digitization with keeping your business human, because ultimately that's what your clients want, isn't it? They're going to want to speak to people at the end of the day.
One of the great things that in my business is we set up these automated workflows. So when something happens, it sets off a trigger. In particular, we've got proposal software, and when a new client signs, it detects that it's a new client, and it takes them on like a journey throughout. Well, the system sets up things like our time tracking. It creates them as a client, so no longer do we need someone to then go in and manually enter data from one system into another. We can do it automatically, and that is a wonderful thing. In sending out standard emails, and we use a messaging system called Slack, and it will send a message to a channel in Slack to say, "Oh, congratulations, everyone! We've won a new client." That's getting rid of the problem of a new client picking up the phone saying, "Oh, hi, I'm Joe." Who? The staff don't know who it is. We're getting rid of those sorts of problems, and technology can do that.
I think it's nice when we're reflecting on the last 3 years of the podcast on how honest and open and frank our guests have been about their experiences of establishing or maintaining their small business. And I'm particularly drawn to the episode that we did with Sutherland entrepreneur Natasha Madonna, who talked very openly and honestly about her experiences of establishing her market research and market agency, and how she didn't have all of the answers at the start, how it was very much just established at the kitchen table, but having the right people around her and having the confidence to go ahead and being comfortable with what she knew and what she didn't know was really refreshing, and I think provided a great listen for anybody who was on the brink of taking the decision to start up their own business.
I looked around and I could just see the opportunity. So it was a eureka moment, I think. It was, actually, I can do something a bit different. And then the next kind of eureka moment was actually that saying, I think there's another opportunity to evolve it a little bit further. And then by that point, I had staff and I had a team of people that I was working with, and clients that kept on coming back to us, and it felt like a real company as opposed to just my idea. And actually hiring people that could do things that I couldn't do as well, which is part of the fun, I think, about having a business. Why have a business and just hire clones of you who can just do what you do? The real fun comes when you hire people who can bring other thoughts and ideas, and that's where I think the real magic has happened.
Yeah, it goes back to that. You don't always have to be the brightest person in the room, doesn't it? You can hire people to do the things that you can't. Along that line, Mark Rennie from WOBBLU, who I chatted to a while ago, said it's really important to focus on the stuff you can control yourself, to relieve anxiety, because if you're trying to be all things to all people, that's when things are going to go wrong. And also hiring people who aren't clones of you. You know, if you need to hire people who can do the things that you can't.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've heard that an awful lot. And some of the teams that we've heard associated with the people who've been on the podcast are always bringing new and different and important skills to help that small business grow. And I think that's always a nice part of recording these podcasts, is hearing the teams and the personalities behind some of the businesses.
So we don't even have an office, so everyone's distributed sort of around the northeast, and a couple of people sort of distributed abroad as well. I think we'll look to be like remote first, so we'll get an office at some point, but it's like for collaboration, not like sort of congregation. We just go there when it makes sense, or if people want to be there. No, not like force people there, you know. I think it's like an interesting topic because you've got big companies like Apple and Google forcing people back into the office for a few days a week, and you know they're not stupid. Like, you know, they're multi-billion-dollar companies. It's like, what do they know that sort of I don't here? But you know, I can only focus on what I can control, and that's remote first eventually.
One of the nice dynamics of the podcast has been able to take the podcast on tour and give the podcast to other universities who are working really closely in supporting small firms in areas and sectors that here at Northumbria we don't currently serve. And I think that's provided really nice, fresh insights, maybe in a different geography or through a different institution, of how colleagues are supporting small firms. One episode that really comes to mind was the episode with Professor Jeni Smith and co-founder of Hydraulics Online, Helen Tonks, MBE, who talked about the infrastructure behind entrepreneurs and how important, when you've got busy lives at home and setting up a business, in this case with a husband, and establishing a very successful online business, the importance of a coach and a mentor to guide through the ups and the downs of the business journey.
Do you have any tips for people who maybe want to embrace change a little bit more, want to develop kind of new things, but might not be aware of where to start?
Well, whether it's not knowing where to start or lacking the confidence to do it, because change is scary. And I know, I can even say, I don't want to paint the picture that it's all been a bed of roses for us. So we moved off network software and up into the cloud in COVID. I decided to take the opportunity to move us, and Mark, my husband, was desperately anti it. It was a really interesting time to be in business with your husband, because you know he's an engineer, as are many others in the team, and they want to know that if you do X, Y is going to happen, and it's all very predictable and it's all very controlled. Yeah. And obviously change, often, you know, you can do all the planning, all the preparation, but you've still got to take a deep breath and take a big leap of faith and know that there are some things that you can only sort of work out at the time. So there was a nice bit of healthy tension at that point, she says politely. So it would be, obviously, whether if you've got a particular idea but you're feeling out of depth, it's going to be reaching into your network, your local, you know, business school, because there's invariably going to be support there, or someone that can put you in touch with somebody who's already taken those steps and who is willing to sort of share their journey and their insights. And I think as well today, with the world post-COVID and, you know, webinars and everything, they're just so commonplace. And I think that's the beauty of this hybrid world now, is you don't necessarily have to take a day or a big chunk of time out of your diary to educate yourself and to join, and even if it's just in listen mode, join in on a conversation and learn. So at the moment, for example, I'm fascinated by AI and what that can do. Many people are. And I'm trying to immerse myself in that to better understand what it could mean for us as a business and what steps we could start to take
to better prepare ourselves for going on that journey.
And I think mentoring is becoming more and more common now, isn't it? It used to be something that perhaps was provided for senior leaders in really large organisations, but that comes up quite a lot with our guests, the importance they see in finding a really useful mentor and actually then going on to mentor people themselves. I think it's really nice to pay it forward, isn't it? If you've had that mentoring experience that's been really positive for your business.
I remember the power to listening to your employees was a subject that we covered all the way back in one of our early episodes with Craig Skillyhorn from DDC Electronics, based all the way down at the Isle of Wight. The only guest I know who went to work on a hovercraft. But what Craig did talk about was the importance of people and the importance of getting the right teams in place. And the only way of doing that was listening directly to his employees. And actually, I remember in that episode, Craig talked about his experiences studying at Northumbria on international business management and then going off and working for Rolls-Royce and then later for DDC and being quite new in role and talking about the powers from the owner, the American firm who owned the business, the main business, and the responsibility and the freedom that he had on the Isle of Wight within his business and how he was listening to his employees to get the right people in place to allow him to hit his key targets.
He also mentioned that as an employee, it's making the most of what's on offer to you as well. So if you're an employee in a large organisation that has the funds to allow you to do this, take up the training, the development that's on offer, travel if that's an option, because ultimately you'll develop your leaders and those leaders will stay if they see that there are development opportunities on offer.
Go and make the most of all the opportunities that are going to come your way. Because working for a company like Rolls-Royce was just fantastic for that. The development that I got, they invested well in their people. I'd been there a few years and I was sent on a development program, and I had 2 weeks out in Malaysia. And we were getting training courses. We were getting these amazing, like, world-class speakers come and see us. And you get that because you're Rolls-Royce. So it just attracts people to come and do that. I'm visiting parts of the world that I'll never go to again, and very few people have gone to. And just making the most of that is really important, because like you said before, you just pick all that up as you're going. The advice I think I would give myself is kind of take note of all these opportunities and just take a little piece from each of them, because they're all going to be useful one day. They're all going to be part of kind of what you're going to end up.
An episode that our colleague Kate Harland did with Steve Underwood from Bonded, a marketing agency, and really emphasising the importance of trust, client expectations, making sure that you're always offering the best service for your client. But that can only happen when the culture of the organisation and your values align. So I think that was really something that he emphasised. And it's not just for marketing agencies, it's for every business really needs to understand the value that they provide to their customers. And that in turn creates that trust with your customers. Keep them coming back.
In this world that we live in, so much stuff going on, so many fast developments, it can be overwhelming for some people at times. Am I doing the right thing, aren't I? I think just anchoring back on the fundamental principles of life are often the most important. So one of the fundamental aspects of running a successful agency is trust. We work with people, they need to be able to trust us. Otherwise it's probably not going to work. So, they've got to trust that we're the best partner for them, that they're investing X amount in us, and we're going to deliver on what they think is a valuable, ideally exceed on what they think is expected. And they need to trust us that we can do that, and that's why they're employing us to do it. So when we consult with them and say, right, yeah, we're going to deliver this plan, we believe it's going to take this amount of time, that trust is critical, and I expect them to say, great, brilliant. Obviously, there's loads of nuances in that conversation, but it's never a problem, really. But I think it comes from experience, from setting the right expectations, delivering a great client experience, so that when you have the more challenging conversations, they trust you versus the stuff that you're doing really well.
We started this podcast at the same time as we started delivering Help to Grow management at Northumbria. And so it's a really integral part of what we do. What's really important, I suppose, and comes over is the 70-20-10 rule when we're thinking about leadership development and whether it works, because people always want to understand whether it's worth doing the course, whether it's, it actually works. And that really means that 10% of the learning comes from doing the course, the formal course materials and so on. 20% from social interaction and talking to your colleagues, talking to your peers. But 70% is from learning on the job and application, that experiential learning that we talk a lot about at universities. And we heard from one of our guests, Phil Robinson-Hartley, who was one of the early participants on Help to Grow. And he found it so life-changing in a way because he'd engaged in the course to allow him to think about the business and think about using structured ways of thinking. But it was really when he went back into the organisation and shared the learning with his colleagues and really then put things into practice, that implementation that really provided the change for him. So I suppose learning and development, that's what we're all about, but it's really engaging with change and living it through your business.
I'd been out of education for 15 years, so I thought, well, it was a way of getting back into education. It seemed like a really good course to get into. I could get the budget for it because the budget was quite cheap because it was only £750, so it was almost a no-brainer to do it. I put it to my directors. They said, yep, push along with it, it's great. Completely changed when I actually went on the course because basically I'm in this new environment. I'd only been there for a couple of years and I was a little bit on the back foot with it. I'd been in the hospitality trade for about 10 years before that, so it was completely different. So basically, as we were going through the course, when we were doing the 12 modules, it was giving us a little bit more confidence to look under the stones. It was giving us like some sort of rigid way of doing things. So basically, I'd come home each week, or I'd go back into the office each week with a new idea in my head. And it gave us that structure to hang that idea off until somebody actually dealt with it. So it meant it could push the business on a little bit.
So it's been really interesting looking back over the last 3 years, and hopefully you, the listener, have taken away some of the things that we've thought have really stood out from meeting our guests. And looking forward, we are going to be talking to Reshma Bacon from the Federation of Small Business and really understand what support networks can do for your business in the current climate. There's a lot happening, as we know, in the next couple of months. So thank you for listening. If you'd like to find out more about previous episodes, please go to northumbria.ac.uk/help to grow.